April 1st. Tickets and information at floridatheater.com. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, union busting at the highest levels. We talk about a new film examining a historic labor victory that almost didn't happen and what lessons it offers for the First Coast. Then, eating for a healthier planet. We preview a symposium that explains the small changes that can come with big environmental benefits. And in space, dust isn't just an irritant, it's seed material for stars, planets, and even life. We get the dirt from our resident spaceman. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, says he's taking responsibility for creating a text group that talked about secret war plans. The group used the commercial messaging app Signal to exchange information. A journalist was inadvertently included on that chat. Waltz told Fox News' Laura Ingraham that he built the Signal chat group, not a subordinate.
Was there a mistake? Absolutely. We're going to improve it. We're going to fix it. And we're going to move forward to achieve the president's agenda.
Top Trump administration officials were on the Signal chat, including Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and CIA Director John Ratcliffe. Both will testify before a House committee today. A note, the CEO of NPR, Catherine Marr, also chairs the board of the nonprofit Signal Foundation. Vice President Vance says he plans to join his wife on a trip to Greenland this week. NPR's Deepa Shivaram reports Greenland has gotten a lot of attention since President Trump began talking about acquiring the Danish territory.
Greenland is an autonomous territory of Denmark. In a White House video, the vice president says he will look into, quote, security at the U.S. Space Force base there.
A lot of other countries have threatened Greenland, have threatened to use its territories and its waterways to threaten the United States, to threaten Canada, and of course to threaten the people of Greenland. So we're going to check out how things are going there.
Greenlandic leaders were already expressing concern that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz would travel to Greenland later this week, as President Trump has ramped up rhetoric of wanting to annex the island. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News, the White House.
The CEOs of NPR and PBS will appear today before a House subcommittee on government efficiency. It's chaired by Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. As NPR's Scott Newman reports, the heads of the largest U.S. public broadcasting networks will be there to answer questions about perceived political bias.
NPR CEO Catherine Marr and PBS President and CEO Paula Kerger will appear on Capitol Hill before Georgia Republican Greene's Delivering on Government Efficiency Subcommittee. Greene and several of her GOP colleagues have accused the public broadcasters of a left-wing bias in their news and cultural programming. The hearing is part of a larger Republican-led push to eliminate federal funding for public broadcasting. NPR receives about 1% of its operating revenue directly from the federally funded Corporation for Public Broadcasting, while PBS receives about 16% of its funds from the CPB. Scott Newman, NPR News, Washington.
President Trump has signed a new executive order on voting. It requires voters to show proof of citizenship when they register to vote using the federal form. Trump has made baseless claims about large numbers of non-citizens voting. To be clear, such cases are extremely rare. Voting rights advocates say Trump does not have the authority to do this, and legal challenges are expected. You're listening to NPR.
You're listening to WJCT News, 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's now 9:04. A proposal to strengthen transparency and oversight in the way the city funds nonprofit organizations is ready for review by the Jacksonville City Council. The legislation proposed by Mayor Donna Deegan's office would tighten the reins on grants earmarked for local charities, by making sure organizations with connections to city leaders or their family members face competition for funding. Deegan says it's a matter of leveling the playing field.
What it does is raise the bar by requiring a 2/3 vote of the council instead of a simple majority to waive the requirements. So before you ask, because I know you will, let me be clear. This is not a response to any instance from the past. I see it as living up to Jacksonville's history as a leader in transparency.
The measure was introduced to City Council this week. Additional details and a copy of the legislation can be found in the story at jaxtoday.org. Naval Air Station Jacksonville drivers will soon be seeing Jacksonville police officers handing out traffic tickets on base. The Sheriff's Office is partnering with NAS Jax Security to help with traffic enforcement. The Navy says JSO will be patrolling all areas of the base on Jacksonville's west side. Plenty of sunshine today here in Northeast Florida. We're going to stay dry as well. Highs will reach the low to mid 80s for inland areas and the mid 70s along the coast. We'll also have light winds today as well. Overnight, mostly clear skies with lows dipping down into the mid 50s, and we cool down a bit tomorrow.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Bank of America. From local shops to global enterprises, Bank of America is committed to helping businesses of all sizes make every move matter. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/banking for business.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, with billionaire executives leading the charge against organized labor, we talk to 3 local experts about how the union landscape has changed, as well as what can be learned from one historic labor victory at an Amazon warehouse. Later in the program, eating better for your health and the planet's. But first, is a resurgent labor movement a sign of things to come, or are political and economic realities putting unions out of reach? Here to talk about it, I am joined by Dr. Daniel Cronrath, United Faculty of Florida, head of the United Faculty of Florida at FSCJ. Welcome.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you, Dan. Dr. David Jaffee, head of the United Faculty of Florida at the University of North Florida.
I'm a member.
A member, okay. Apologies. I don't have a title in there. And Russell Harper, who is president of the North Florida Central Labor Council. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for being back. This film is being screened April 1st on next Tuesday at the headquarters of the IBEW here, the local 177. Tell us a little bit just about the idea of the film union, if you can. What is it about?
Well, I'd rather he speak to it because they're the ones that brought it to me.
Okay. Fine. Daniel.
Sure, Ann. This was actually a suggestion of David that he and I have developed a tradition that once a year we'd like to try to screen a film, which is something which is not going to be like a mainstream film. It's going to be something which is very, very insightful to the way people conduct their lives. So when David, of course, we were all aware of the opportunity in Staten Island to organize the workers at the Amazon warehouse. And when we found out there was a documentary being made, we thought this would be a great opportunity for our unions, and again, this is an effort of our unions, not an effort of our institutions, to basically provide an opportunity not only for our brothers and sisters who are currently in a union here in North Florida, but also folks who are interested in organizing their workplace. We're sitting in a moment right now with a lot of the energy that we see, for example, at the town hall, which was conducted on Monday here in town, that none of our local elected officials showed up at, but there was a lot of energy. One of the ways that people could really create an action plan for themselves if they want to get more involved is to get more involved with unions. If you look at the history of the Democratic Party in the United States, going back to the Civil Rights Movement, one of the things which enabled us to accomplish all of those wonderful victories for women, for people of color, was the fact that we had a strong labor base which carried a lot of these initiatives over the finish line, because even folks who were not culturally there with what the country was doing still valued their union job, the increased salary, the benefits that they were receiving from being part of their union. So we were hoping that showing this film would help kind of create a resurgence and create an action plan for folks in our neighborhood, in our community, who really want to keep going with this momentum.
And this film documents, David, the effort, this sort of David versus Goliath effort at the Staten Island Amazon Fulfillment Center. And it was a story that was covered, but this film crew actually embedded very early on. And it's this, documentary. There's no voiceover. It's just the voices of the people in the film and in the effort to unionize. And it's a pretty remarkable story.
Yeah, I think what's critical about this is that there's been what we call an upsurge in energy oriented toward an interest by workers in joining unions. Right now, we've got the highest approval rating for unions since about 1965. About 70% of the American public supports unions. Many of them want to join a union. And over the last 15 or 20 years, we've seen a real deterioration in working conditions. We call it precarious work. It's increasingly the standard and the mode of work that many working class people are experiencing. So they have an interest in organizing, and you see this across the country in this upsurge. We see it in Starbucks. That's gotten a lot of attention as well. I think what's significant about this film is the fact that even though you have many workers who would like to join a union and organize a union, you have an enormous effort by corporate entities like Amazon, like Trader Joe's, like Starbucks, to prevent any kind of unionization within their organization. And they do this, through the hiring of professional law firms, which specialize in what they call union avoidance. I would call it union busting. And these firms are spending millions and millions of dollars to try to figure out ways to prevent workers from exercising their rights of organization in the workplace. There was an article written some time ago about the evolution of these efforts, and the title was From Brass Knuckles to Briefcases. And the point is, at one time when workers were talking union, so to speak, they would just call out the company goons, the goon squad, and they would beat them physically with brass knuckles. Now they hire professional law firms. Amazon has hired a professional law firm, Morgan Lewis. Starbucks uses Littler Mendelson. And again, as the interest in unions increases among working class people, you're going to see an increasing effort by these corporate entities to do whatever they can by hiring legal firms who end up giving them advice, which, for one reason or another, produces one National Labor Relations Act violation after another. All of these corporations have been guilty of these things. So that's the big story. You're fighting against one of the most powerful corporations that has enormous amounts of money to invest in union busting, and they prevailed.
And this, just in the year that this issue of unionization at the Staten Island warehouse, was happening, Amazon spent $4.3 million on anti-union consultants just in that year. This effort, meanwhile, to unionize spent $120,000 through GoFundMe. Russell, I wonder if you can talk about how, what that says about kind of what the root of a union effort is, or the people that are, actively organizing.
Well, the roots for the union are people that want to be union. It's not 100% about wages. It's about benefits, health care, a pension, and dignity and respect in the workplace. And a lot of these, like with Starbucks, the workers were not getting the respect and the dignity that they deserved. And when a company can spend, or a corporation can spend that kind of money to fight unions, if they'd have just used that money and paid their workers better and treated them better, everybody would have been better off with a lot less money spent. But it's about, as you said, they're going to see more and more people wanting to be union with the way this country's going, the way they're treating workers. So, Starbucks and Amazon prove that it can be done. It's a lot of work and it's costly, but it can be done. So I think we'll see more and more smaller businesses, workers try to become union.
We know that worker rights and the union effort got a boost in the pandemic and post-pandemic era when you had a lot of frontline workers who didn't feel like they had protections, all of a sudden, kind of inspired to take up the cause of union organizing. But I wonder if you think that there's anything, what do you think it was that was successful for these particular efforts at a Starbucks where there were some successes, or at this particular union warehouse that allowed them to succeed where others have not?
Well, part of it's the dedication of the people trying to organize. They feel they need to organize, and it's for their own protection and survival. So people are going to see it more and more that they need to organize and be unionized, to protect themselves.
Yeah, I would just add to that it's a different model that's being used, excuse me, at Amazon and Starbucks. These aren't established AFL-CIO unions that are coming in and organizing. This is what we call worker-to-worker organizing. The Amazon Labor Union is an independent union that emerged out of the workers communicating with each other, worker-to-worker organizing, that ultimately built that union. You're seeing the same thing at Starbucks, so it's a different model. The established unions don't have the funds, they don't have the staffing, but you can see, as Russell said, the energy of these workers to organize themselves, to communicate with each other, and actually to successfully establish a union against all odds.
Yeah. And we know that in this movie that's going to be screened on April 1st, that there are a lot of voices that are part of it in terms of the effort and the people that were in support of the union. I just want to take a little listen to some of the film here now where we hear some of those voices.
I happen to be a current Amazon worker at JFK. The pay and the work conditions are totally a nightmare.
They expect you to do 200, then after that they want you to do another 3, and then they want you to do another 4. They think that we're robots.
Starting today, 8,000 Amazon warehouse workers on Staten Island will begin voting on whether they want to form a union.
You sign up, man, get a free plate, contribute to our movement. We can all help.
When's your next class?
Mine is now.
So you need to put the game down and find out how to get in there. We got to continue to fight because this company has not been held accountable.
Is Chris Smalls. He was fired when he went outside and protested.
You make Amazon $638 million a day. It's time we get paid our fair share.
Cancel all your plans unless it's family related. They ain't family related, we have to change. Like, we got to.
There's nothing that can stop our momentum. The only thing that's going to stop us is if we stop ourselves.
So Daniel, I wonder if you can talk about some of the efforts that the union organizers were met with. I mean, they mentioned there Chris Smalls. He sort of initiated this effort. He started a walkout during the pandemic because he didn't think that the workers were being kept safe. They didn't have appropriate gear. And so he was fired, but he continued to basically come back every day to the union and stand outside and try to get others to join him.
Yeah, and that one of the reasons why this film is going to be so interesting for people to see is because that is very, very atypical behavior. Mm-hmm. A lot of people just in their own life and don't have the resources, the time. They would find themselves going back out and, of course, trying to find a new job if they had been terminated. But Smalls was in it, and he was in it for the long run. And he mentioned and he talked about the faces of his workplace people, which is why he was back there doing it. It wasn't just for himself. He was one of these people who really got swept up and had the vision for the larger cause, which was looking at in solidarity, which is the nature of unions, and looking at his brothers and sisters in that workplace and saying, I can't let this go. This is become the new passion of my life. This is what I have to do. And I think that's, for folks interested in coming out and seeing the film, I think that's going to be one of the things which is going to really resonate. You can make a difference in your workplace, even if you're like David and I, and you're in academia, or if you're with the Florida Times Union, which organized their newsrooms. White collar, I hate to make that differentiation between blue collar jobs and white collar jobs, but white collar unions can also make a difference too. I know David and I have showed up in solidarity with the UAW. We've shown up at various actions here in town because we support people who are in the unions, and all of us have the ability, and in our workplace, to do that kind of thing and to follow the examples of Chris Smalls, as you mentioned. It doesn't have to be that huge either. You don't have to put your entire life on hold. But any little thing that you can do in order to help with the larger movement is something which you're going to feel good about, and you're going to be improving the conditions of everybody in your community.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the modern labor movement and the challenges it faces under a new administration. You can join the conversation by calling 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Got a call from Jason in Riverside. Good morning, Jason. Go ahead.
Good morning, Ann. I want to thank you all for being on the show this morning and thank your panelists. I'm a former president of a local education unit, and my comment really is for those listening in on this program to let them know that really all we're asking for as labor and workers is a chance to do our jobs, do it fairly carefully, be treated like human beings as opposed to quote unquote capital, and get a contract that is as enforceable as any other executive contract can be. People want to work. They do want to work, and they come together in order to get a very fair deal. So anyways, thank you for your time, and thank you for the panelists.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate your call. We also have a call from John in Riverside. Good morning, John. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm third generation union. When my grandfather organized the Bond Bed Company back in the 20s, when the goons came at him with brass knuckles, he nailed his union sign to a bigger stick and went back on the line. I'm third generation. I retired at 55. I've had Cadillac health insurance my entire life. My 401k advisor just told me I should be spending my money faster, that I'll still leave a nice estate. I want to point out today that this morning's news had a message about the Florida legislature wants to allow businesses to hire apprentices at a minimum wage. The minimum wage I earned as a 16-year-old in 1964 was the equivalent of about $26 an hour today. If a kid isn't worth $7 and whatever it is, 45 cents a minimum wage today, he's not worth training. There's something else wrong. If you look at every problem we have, it's because young people aren't getting their fair share of the economy that they're contributing to, whether it's young people not getting married or even dating. A guy has to be able to, at least carry his weight in a marriage.
John, thank you. Appreciate the call. I want to talk a little bit about how the new administration might be reshaping some of the conversations around the labor movement. We know that some of the successes that were experienced at Starbucks or at Amazon by those workers organizing, part of it was a tighter labor market, but there was also some decisions that were made by the National Labor Relations Board under President Biden, which made some very important decisions that allowed them to move forward. We know now that agency is targeted by a couple of people that have close relations to the Trump administration, including Elon Musk, including Jeff Bezos of Amazon, who don't have a lot of favor for unions. So what do you anticipate happening? How is that going to trickle down and impact future organizing efforts?
Well, the National Labor Relations Board is really the body that enforces labor law in the United States. So it's critical that it's staffed by people who actually understand the labor struggle and have an experience with labor, not corporate types who've spent their careers maybe involved in union busting. But also they have to have the resources to enforce the laws. And my fear is that there will be efforts to obviously modify the membership of the National Labor Relations Board and also defund the National Labor Relations Board to the extent that it cannot enforce the laws that exist. Workers probably can't depend on these laws because, many of these laws have been in place and, employers violate them anyway. So the point is, that's why you have a union. We've always had labor laws that protect workers, but if the employers are violating them routinely, then workers have to take matters into their own hands. So it's even a greater reason that we need to see unions being built in these organizations to take on the employers, because they may not be able to rely on the National Labor Relations Board and the enforcement mechanisms of that agency.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, to your point about the violations, we have a soundbite from an interview that Chris Smalls, who was the lead organizer in this Staten Island warehouse effort, talking about his dismissal. Let's just listen to what he had to say, and then I'll ask you about it.
I worked at Amazon for nearly 5 years. I started out entry level. I worked hard, got promoted up to an assistant manager. In 2020, when the pandemic started, I wanted to make sure that Amazon had a real plan to protect its employees. I was watching my people come in every day with different flu-like symptoms, without PPE, without protections, without cleaning supplies. So for me, organizing was the only way to really get our voices heard. As a result of me stepping up, I was probably the only Amazon worker in its 29 years to ever receive a phone call stating that I was terminated.
So that last part that he's referencing is basically he says, you're supposed to get a verbal warning and then documentation, and then you get a write up, and then you get terminated, and that they basically skipped all of those processes after 5 years and called him and told him he was fired.
Yeah, I mean, those are exactly the circumstances that happened to Mr. Smalls, and of course, as David already pointed out, these are illegal activities. They're not allowed to be able to do this thing, but then it becomes a question of enforcement. The one thing I did want to go back on quickly when you brought up the national politics of this is I want to acknowledge just a little bit about the Biden administration that David was talking about. Probably the greatest victory for labor during the Biden administration was his appointments to the National Labor Relations Board. And I think that's going to be critical to watch, is how aggressive does President Trump go to try to remove these appointees prior to their term of service expiring. The other thing that President Biden did that I know that Russell was very, very aware of was he was the first sitting president to ever go to an action, to ever actually appear at a picket line at the UAW worker strike. So yes, you may say that's symbolic, but it's very important symbolism to people who are involved in their unions to see a president do that. And then lastly, we were talking a little bit prior to coming on the program. The disappointing aspect was the not being able to pass the PRO Act, which would have essentially gotten rid of right to work laws in the United States and really, really encouraged and gotten rid of a lot of the southern states, of course, we know, who aren't allowed to pass fair share legislation and things along those lines. That would have been a great victory. It did not happen, but still, I just wanted to acknowledge a little bit some of the victories that the Biden administration was able to get done while they were in power.
Russell, how important is that to have a sitting president show up at an event like that? Obviously, he's been throughout his life, he was a very strong supporter of labor.
Well, it was great. I mean, first of all, it inspired the workers. But to have somebody that can enforce and point the boards that supports the workers is paramount to what we need. Here in Florida, they're doing everything they can to make it tougher to be union. And if the National Labor Relations Act is weakened or the board is weakened, we're not going to get any support in Florida. But every legislative session, they try to take away workers' rights and protections.
Can I speak to that really quickly,
Sure.
too? Because David and I both experienced this in our separate unions relative to what Russell was talking about, actions from Tallahassee. We now, to be a member of our union, no longer have payroll deduction. So typically in the past, you would just automatically have it come out of your paycheck. The police and fire unions who support the GOP were exempted from that legislation, but every educator in the state of Florida now had to set up a separate system. In addition to that, the membership threshold in order to maintain your union was increased from 50% membership to 60% membership. Now, I am proud of my union at FSCJ to say that we almost have a 75% participation rate. And because there was an effort by our union to make sure that we remain stable. But, there were colleges and universities who ended up becoming decertified in the state because they couldn't mobilize quickly enough to react to that kind of pressure, which, by the way, is really just a form of legislative union busting, too. That's what it is.
Now, what is the explanation, David, when there are unions exempted, police and fire among them, where they're allowed to, for instance, continue their practice of deducting from payroll the union dues and not having to go outside and create a separate route to do that?
Well, it's obviously a political decision. You favor certain kinds of workers over other kinds of workers, right? Law enforcement, people that are involved in the law enforcement areas. It also is a way to divide workers, right? Like some have special privileges that others don't. That undermines solidarity. So it's really targeting particular kinds, in this case, public sector workers, teachers, particularly university professors. They've been under attack enormously in the state of Florida, and it's not going to end anytime soon. We have a legislative session now, and one only knows what's going to come out of there, but already things are looking pretty bad. They're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, despite the fact that unions have seen a steady decline in their membership over the last 40 or 50 years. We have one of the lowest percentages of working people in a union compared to any other comparable country in the world, and they are still pushing to reduce the number of people who have the opportunity to join a union. So, this is what happens when you have a huge imbalance between capital and labor in the United States. And the only countervailing force historically has been a strong labor movement. That's the only thing that is going to thwart corporate domination in the United States.
And let me add to that, David, too. If you're listening to the program today and perhaps being unions is not an important topic to you, you would have to ask yourself, with what's going on in education and with the attack on unions, who are you going to find in the future who wants to be a school teacher in the state of Florida? Who are you going to be recruiting to that occupation if they know that every day that they're not going to be paid an adequate wage, they're not going to be getting a wage that can repay their student loans, which are still escalating? You're going to find, our public education system, which impacts everyone, is going to end up being disproportionately negatively impacted by these kinds of actions, unless we all come together and say, no, enough is enough. We're going to support the right of people to unionize. We're going to support these basic agreements, but parts of a collective bargaining agreement. Yeah, I know for myself, for example, just to be transparent, 1% of my salary goes to my union dues. However, I also know, and this is the same, this is not an FSCJ thing, this is for every institution, if I ever have an issue in my workplace, the college and the university in Florida, their interest is the college and the university. The only thing I have protecting me is my union, is the support that I get from my union if I ever have an issue, and the attorney that they will provide me, and the legal counsel will provide me. So at any rate, sorry, David.
No, that's quite all right. One thing I would say, before we finish this, is that despite the fact that they were able to establish a union through this long, hard struggle, a monumental victory, Amazon still refuses. And that victory was accomplished in 2022. Amazon still refuses to sit down with the Amazon labor union and negotiate a contract.
And explain how that's possible. I mean, if you have this group that's representing employees, how is it that the union is not compelled to acknowledge them officially?
There's all kinds of stalling techniques. There's appeals. There's legal efforts. And that's been going on. They've been dragging their feet. The same thing has happened to the few places where they've established a labor union in the Starbucks stores. And now Amazon is claiming that the National Labor Relations Act is unconstitutional. So this is the latest effort to try to indicate that any federal effort to protect workers in relationship to their employers is somehow a violation of the constitutional rights of Amazon or Starbucks or any other corporate entity. So this is the direction things are going in. And one only, can imagine what's going to happen if something like this goes to the Supreme Court under the current composition.
What is the difference in a union battle when it's a specific employer like Starbucks versus an industry like the writer's strike and the film in Hollywood, that strike, which seems to be a little bit more diffuse in terms of the people you're organizing?
One of the worst parts of it is all those workers are dealing with one company, whereas in an industry, each person or each corporation will add a little different input, and you might find someone in this corporation that supports your issues in different parts. But when you've only got the one entity that you're dealing with, then there's no other input from anybody. And going back to this National Labor Relations Board, the people have to be there to enforce just like we need our Constitution enforced in the United States. You need to enforce the rules that are there, and that's what Biden was trying to do. He was trying to put some teeth in it where it was actually enforced, and we're going to see that going further and further away from the workers, which is going to in turn make more and more people decide they need to be unionized.
How does it impact people, for instance, in your union they're already unionized? Presumably you already have those relationships and are doing those negotiations. You don't have this battle ahead of you. Are you concerned also about the state or the security of the union?
Well, absolutely. I mean, even though we have contracts in place, and I'm from the construction industry originally. I'm a retired electrician. We have contracts, but if the government and the laws are not enforced, we could see it affecting us as well. Actually, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers is also affected by that Senate Bill 256 because we represented the maintenance workers at the school board.
I'm sorry, and 256 again is?
Senate Bill 250. That's the one that made it where they couldn't deduct union dues
Gotcha.
from their paychecks.
Thank you.
And they are trying to make that even stronger this time. Worse for workers and unions. But with several unions, AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, does clerical at Duval. They lost a lot of members. In fact, one of their unions was decertified, and they're having to go back to the process of trying to get it back, all because they decided that working people other than police and fire can't have their union dues deducted from their paycheck on the public sector.
Right. And are we seeing some impacts already in terms of attrition, teachers leaving, the state or leaving the profession because of these pressures on the union or on employees?
Well, I think from my perspective, and I'll ask David to share the sentiment as well, I think it's probably impacting K through 12 right now more than it's impacting higher education. Now, I know that we've had colleagues who have talked about leaving Florida and things like that.
Why
But
why would there be a difference?
well, I think, well, first of all, just to say this bluntly, K through 12 teachers work a lot harder. I mean, it is, I would never in a day of my life want to try to be a first grade or a fifth grade or a seventh grade teacher doing fresh lesson plans every day and, shepherding a class of 25 kids in a classroom. It's very, very difficult. And if you're going into a workplace which you find to be contentious or your work's not being rewarded or you're just being met by constant opposition, why would you want, and by the way, and still getting out of school with the same level of student debt that you would have going into any kind of private sector occupation, it's just, there's so many headwinds there to try to recruit somebody to be a teacher in that kind of environment. But I do think eventually it will also impact, I will say this regarding what Russell was saying about SB 256. There has been, I think, an opposite reaction, at least from my perspective, in higher education unions. I feel like we're stronger today since the legislature did this than we were prior, because folks now are really, really aware of what they're trying to do to us. I mean, when we hit our 75% mark, that was an increase from where we were after they attempted to try to, create barriers and try to decertify us. So I think that you're seeing that. I don't know if David at UNF has experienced that kind of same thing or not.
It is it is more difficult for academics to just move on to another job versus teachers in the primary and secondary sectors because jobs are scarce and you can't just decide, oh, well, I'm going to move someplace else and get a job at this university or that university. But there are three things that have happened with the effort by the legislature to go after higher ed and make it difficult for professors on a number of fronts, including the exercise of free speech. And that is, we're having a more difficult time recruiting good faculty for jobs that we're advertising. We're having a harder time retaining the best faculty because they are the ones that probably have the greatest ability to find a position in another university. And what I tell my students, because I want them to understand the severity of this situation, it is hurting the reputation of the state university system. The degree will be viewed a particular way by virtue of what people know nationally about what has happened in Florida.
When you talked earlier about the precarity of workers, I did want to kind of ask you a little bit more about that, whether that, is a safety thing, whether that's a job security thing, in part because we know that in this effort to unionize at the Amazon warehouse, they were dealing with a 150% annual turnover rate. So they have a constant flow of people who are coming in, maybe are not satisfied with the job, maybe aren't performing well, but they're leaving in huge numbers. And so any attempt to organize is naturally going to face this erosion of support all the time.
The concept of precarious work is something that emerged given the changes in the working conditions in the United States. The concept didn't exist 25 years ago. So it's an indication of what working people are facing. And I'm not talking about just, working class people, blue collar workers. I'm talking about college educated students. The ability to find a secure, well-paying job that provides something like a career with benefits is simply more and more difficult. So employment has become less secure and more precarious for workers generally. Then when you add to that what I would call the sweatshop conditions that exist in these so-called fulfillment centers. And by the way, it's not called a fulfillment center because the work is fulfilling. It's called a fulfillment center because the only thing they're concerned with are the consumers. They have little regard for the workers. The idea is to deliver the goods as quickly and as fast as possible to the consumers. And so under those conditions, there's been many interviews with people who work in these sweatshops, I'm going to call them. The conditions are intolerable, and many people simply can't keep up. And their work is monitored by the rate and by time away from the job, and it's simply more than they can handle. So the fact that people have to actually take these jobs because they're that desperate to make money in this economy says something about the state of American capitalism today.
So this film is going to be screened, as we said, Tuesday. It's going to be at the IBEW Local 177. Russell, first of all, where is that located?
966 North Liberty Street, downtown.
Okay, and so it starts. I guess the doors open at 6. The screening starts at 6:20, but then there'll be some discussion following. What is that going to look like? Who's going to be involved in that?
We are right now, and thank you for that, by the way, and also thank you to both David and I's unions who are going to be providing food for folks who show up at the event. So you can come at 6 o'clock, make yourself a plate, and then we'll start the movie at 6:20. The panel following that, we're going to have some folks from local unions who are going to be discussing topics not only related to the film, but conversation starters. Like, for example, if you watch the film or if you're listening to the program today and you're interested in learning how to organize your workplace, we're going to be able to provide some information for folks like that. And then you'll be able to meet folks in the room who are going to be able to help guide you through those relationships as well following the film.
And just, I think that there's a lot of people that don't know as individuals what the rules are, what a company can or can't do. Is there a place for people to find that kind of information if they're just sort of thinking about the idea of trying to start a union?
I'll let Russell answer that question.
Well, for starters, if you go to the FloridaAFL-CIO.org website, they have information on starting a union. And, of course, Google, you can find almost anything anyway. But you can start at the AFL-CIO in Florida on their website and find how to start a union.
Mm-hmm.
And also, too, Ann, too, for anyone who's out there currently in a union, please feel free to come and to spend some time with your brothers and sisters in solidarity and just enjoy the film as well.
All right. Well, Dr. Daniel Cronrath, Dr. David Jaffee, Russell Harper, thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you.
All right. Up next, eating. Well, food choices can have a big impact, not just on your physical well-being, but also on the planet. Here to tell us about it is Alan Tilley. He's a professor emeritus at the University of North Florida and part of the Sierra Club's climate adaptation and restoration team. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning.
You are leading a project of the Sierra Club, something called the Planetary Health Diet. Can you explain to us what that is?
Well, it's an attempt to sort of live within our budget. If you think about the capacity of the earth to feed us well and to support our health, it's not unlimited. And we have made choices that don't serve us all that well. So in 2019, a group of 37 international geniuses devised this diet. And the question was, what sort of diet would serve human health and would be within the budget, that is, so that we could live on the resources of the earth and so that we could satisfy the needs of the population of the earth. There are about 1 billion hungry people. Well, if you can get the right diet and you can get it distributed well enough, then the earth should be able to feed those billion along with all the rest of us. So the diet that they devised is a flexible one. That's called flexitarian.
Flexitarian.
Yeah, that just means that it's not a rigid diet. It's not one of these things where you have to measure and count the calories and all that. You think of it as sort of a plate, and half of that plate is fruits and vegetables. So you'll eat half fruits and vegetables, and you get your protein from nuts and whole grains and beans, and then you have a couple of tablespoons of oil and a couple of tablespoons of sugar and some starchy vegetables, and you also get once a week, you can have a modest serving, 4 ounces of beef, lamb, or pork. So you can have your quarter pounder. And you can get 2 servings a week of chicken, if you like, 2 servings of fish. You can have a couple of eggs a week, and you can have a glass of milk or a piece of cheese a day. So it's modest servings of meat and dairy, and the earth can support that, and that'll support human health. And those are optional. Personally, I don't exercise the meat. I do exercise some of the dairy, the seafood. I'm glad I was a vegan for a long time. Not anymore. Now I'm a planetary health diet or whatever.
Right.
Whatever. There must be a nice name.
Well, why is it important? We know that the production and the consumption of things like beef can be harmful creators of greenhouse gases. They can be harmful for human health. Why was it important for the people who created this planetary health diet to include some, meat proteins?
Well, what they were doing was try to adapt it to any culture, try to adapt it to the widest possible audience. And there are a lot of people who need or think they need to eat the meat and dairy, and so how much can the earth support? Well, you don't have to. You can be a vegan on this diet and be perfectly legal, planetary health diet follower. But you have the option. It's just up to you. You don't get any extra points for not exercising the option.
So you talk about how this is created to help keep people healthy, to keep the planet healthy. You also talked about 1 billion people who are undernourished right now. Is the idea that if people were eating according to this planetary health diet, that it would in fact be sustainable for the planet?
It would indeed. We have about a third of our greenhouse gas emissions go to agriculture. About over a third of those are for animal agriculture. We will not be able to solve our climate problem unless we change our diets. This is absolutely necessary.
One other element of this diet, I guess, is trying to limit overconsumption and food waste.
Yes.
So you say it's not like you have to measure things out, but it does encourage people to eat in moderation.
Yes, that's right.
And also to be eating what they've served themselves and not throwing it away.
That's right. Food waste is just as important as the diet. Put together, the best thing you can do, the most effective climate action, is to follow this diet, or to follow a diet which is within the budget of the earth. It's better than an electric car. It's better than a solar array on the roof, by far. It's by far, hands down. And it's just about as important that we handle food waste. We've got a program that the Sierra Club is putting on at Tree Hill on this weekend. It's 9:30 to 12:30 on Saturday. And the idea is the power of one. That is, what can one person do that'll really make a difference? The diet's a big deal on that, and so I'm going to talk about that. Logan Cross, who's our chair of the local Sierra Club and also chair of Renew Jacks, is going to talk about how we can make a difference in trying to promote renewable energy in Jacksonville. And Lorene Husband, who's vice president of the public policy and community engagement at Feeding Northeast Florida, is going to speak on food waste, what we can do ourselves to reduce food waste. Rhonda Gracie, horticulturalist and landscape designer at UNF, and won the 2022 Florida Nursery Grower and Landscape Association Outstanding Educator of the Year award, will speak on the power of our yards, what we can do about what we're growing in our yards that will help adapt us to the budget of the earth.
It sounds like a great event. It's at Tree Hill. It's Saturday, March 29th. I understand there'll also be some plants for sale and a guided tour of Tree Hill.
We're going to have the whole thing. It sounds like we're going to have a lot of talking. There won't be much of that, but it's kid friendly. The talking is going to be in the amphitheater, but we'll have all sorts of handouts and information. We'll have refreshments. We'll have if you want to pet some goats, there'll be some goats and pigs who are just looking forward to being petted.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Tilley, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Okay, coming up next, it's tiny, it's everywhere, and it just might be the key to understanding the universe.
Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you.
The Jacksonville Music Experience presents psychedelic rock band Levitation Room, performing live on the WJCT soundstage on Saturday, March 29th at 7 p.m. Tickets and more information at jacksmusic.org/JME events.
Freddie Mac were once independent mortgage finance companies. Then came the 2008 housing crash and a government takeover. Now, the Trump administration wants to privatize them.
So I'm really concerned about execution, and then I'm worried about, are we protecting people from being exploited?
How to get the government out of the mortgage business. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
Houses are now the biggest source of generational wealth for many families. But wildfires in California and elsewhere can destroy much of that wealth in an instant. We look at the choices and the struggle families face after a disaster destroys their home. Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. While space dust is not just a nuisance, it is the building block of stars, planets, and even life itself. Joining me to talk about it is our resident spaceman, Eddie Whistler, director of the planetarium at Mosh. Good morning, Eddie.
Good morning.
Nice to have you here. We're going to talk about space dust.
I mean, you know, what a boring topic, right?
It is not a boring topic, evidently.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
just sort of a segue for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Take it away.
Like, you know, like space dust. It's a show about dust. Oh, but don't scroll away. Don't change the channel because it's space dust.
And it is fascinating. It actually has, it's not just this stuff floating around in the atmosphere. It is really essential to what we know of the universe.
Yeah, it builds these vistas, like these beautiful images. It's hardly there at all. Like nothing could be more ghostly. Here at sea level, we have something like 2 times 10 to the 19th. So take a 2 and then just add 19 zeros after it in every cubic centimeter of breath that you're breathing in here at sea level. You know, those dust vistas, those awesome pictures that we see
We're
from
actually
James
showing
Webb.
a few right now.
I love it. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. That contains anywhere from like 1 to 1,000 particles per cubic centimeter. That's way less than 19 zeros.
Right.
Right.
So down here at Earth, it's falling, it's landing here.
Well, so we're breathing oxygen. You know, it's all of the it's all the molecules, everything that's surrounding us in our atmosphere. What I'm trying to say is that as diffuse as we feel that air is out there in space, even in those thick, quote, thick dust
Yeah.
patches in space, it's like hardly there at all. The reason why we see these amazing pictures is that we're looking at light years across. And so it looks concentrated in our images, but if we were to actually be there, it wouldn't look like we're in a dust cloud anywhere.
It's like the telescopic effect.
It's exactly that, right?
So what do we know about how space dust contributes to the formation of stars and planets?
Very much. So we know a lot about, because there's thousands of different star forming regions in space that we study with our multiple telescopes, and we know a lot. And yet, you know, there's so much detail and so much nuance, and different environments offer different ways that it must happen, that it's really hard to nail down the detail. So there's lots of mystery as well.
Well, what has it done in terms of life on Earth?
Look around in your car if you're driving, in your living room if you're listening. Like in this room, everything around you essentially is space dust, because unless it's hydrogen, then it was built inside of the core of a star somewhere by doing what stars do in order to make atoms, taking hydrogen, building them up into helium, taking helium, forcing them to become carbon and nitrogen and oxygen. And then large stars blow themselves up, and all that stuff that used to be inside of a star is now gas and dust thrust out into space.
Mm-hmm.
And then that is the material that later coalesces to become planets, and the stuff on planets and in the atmospheres.
So the dust
and
is
moons.
carrying things like carbon or phosphorus or things that we know are part of the life cycle.
Yes. So We say dust, but it's helpful if you think about it as dust and gas.
Okay.
Just floating material that's out there in space. Under the right conditions, that stuff starts to fall together in order to become larger stuff. Rock-size stuff, pebbles turn into rock-size stuff, turn into boulders. Over time, those boulders pull in more material. It begets mountain-sized stuff. Begets more and more material. It gets run away. It pulls in more. The gravity gets bigger. The bigger the thing gets, the more gravity it has, the more it pulls in, until you get planet, moon, comet, stars. It's the formation. It's the general story of how anything sizable in the universe forms.
Some people think that this dust could actually be used as a solar shield of some kind to mitigate the impacts of like climate change.
So it is certainly a veil that you could utilize in space. So it's a nuisance for astronomers, right? So we have a distant thing that we're trying to study, and that light has to pass through dust. And so so the answer is yes, because we can shade things with dust. As a matter of fact, there's so many ways to go. The story of dust is so deep. There are episodes in the history of Earth where there are sudden decreases in temperature that we think might have to do with other planets getting pelted by a thing, lofting huge clouds of dust from off of the surface into the inner solar system and blocking sunlight by a fraction, but enough to impact climate over the course of 1,000 years on Earth. So, this is a story that includes geology and includes astronomy. Some of the most well-cited scientific papers are the three-dimensional map of dust in our area of space, because that impacts starlight and all the rest,
It is a subject of a Planetarium Night live show coming up, Vital Dust, on April 11th.
Vital Dust.
People can find info at themosh.org.
Come on,
All right.
visit the site and come see us.
Eddie Whistler, we love having you here. Thanks so much for stopping by.
I love being here.
Join us tomorrow when we're joined by local government expert Chris Hand to discuss the latest state and local headlines. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening.
Is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com.
Hi, it's Tom Hudson, host of the Florida Roundup on Fridays at noon, and we have a special edition soon. We'll be live in Jacksonville on April 4th. We'd love to have you there. It's free and lunch is included. Information and register at wjct.org/events.
This is WJCT.